Tigard.
Good evening, I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the NewsHour this Monday, the lead story. The federal government moves to shore up troubled banks. The rest of the day's news, including the president's call for fiscal responsibility, a reality check discussion on how to cut deficits at the same time government is spending more. A festival of Arab arts provides another way to look at a conflicted region, and a look at Secretary of State Clinton's efforts to balance candor and diplomacy on her Asian trip.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by...
The world is changing, and how we use energy today cannot be how we use it tomorrow. There is no one solution. It's not simply more oil, more renewables, or being more efficient. It's all of it. Our way of life depends on developing all forms of energy and to use less of it. It's time to put our differences aside. Will you be part of the solution? Chevron, human energy.
Grant Thornton.
The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems at home and around the world.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Federal regulators today promised to prop up struggling banks and possibly even take greater ownership stakes in them. But a White House spokesman said President Obama still supports a private banking system. At the same time, Citigroup was widely reported to be asking the government to raise its equity stake in the company. On Wall Street, bank stocks were up, but overall, the market retreated to 11-year lows. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 250 points to close at 7114. The NASDAQ fell 53 points to close at 1387. For more on our lead story, I'm joined by Krishna Guha, U.S. economics editor for the Financial Times. Thank you for joining us tonight. What do we know about what it is that these banks may be asking of the federal government and what the federal government is prepared to do?
Well, the federal government is laying out a framework here that could lead to it taking significant shareholdings in a large number of banks. They don't want that to happen. They would prefer it didn't. And they hope that by offering more support, they'll make this less likely. But here's their plan. They want to stress test the banks. See what would happen if the economy got even worse than it is today. Based on those stress tests, they'll find out how much capital banks might need to survive these rocky scenarios. The government is saying, if no one else will make funds available to you, we'll put up some capital that can convert into equity. In theory, it would be up to the banks to ask for that, but in practice, the regulators could probably cram it down their throats.
Is Citigroup the only bank that we know of that's considering this approach?
So Citi is out there actually asking the government to take a large shareholding in it.
Right.
The executives think that's the only way to shore up market confidence in the bank. At the moment, the government has what's called preferred shares in Citigroup, as it has in a lot of the other banks. These are non-voting stock. They carry a fixed interest rate. Investors think it's not quite as good as having common equity. That's normal shares for normal people. So the executives at Citi are saying, come in, become a large shareholder in our bank, perhaps even as much as a 40% stake in Citigroup. It's a sign of how far we've moved.
I want to read something to you today. This Treasury Department put out a statement which was open to all kinds of interpretation about what they meant. They said the government will ensure that banks have the capital and liquidity they need to provide the credit necessary to restore economic growth. It sounds like the government's trudging down that path to nationalization.
Well, I think their view is that they'll do as little nationalization as they can and still achieve their goal, which is to get credit flowing again to the real economy. But in situations like Citigroup and potentially other banks, if the only alternative to full nationalization is for the government to take 30, 40, or even 50% of the bank, that's the way they'll go.
Is that a distinction without a difference? It sounds like a slippery slope.
Well, you see, there's two ways a government can take greater control of a bank. One way is for the regulators to basically seize the bank and say, we think it's no longer sound, we're going to take it over and run it. The other is for the government to essentially buy shares in that bank. The preference that the Obama administration has is for investing in the bank's equity, which means it continues to be a private company listed on the stock market. But as you say, it's not a yes-no. In either situation, we're talking about increased government control and influence over the financial system.
So if this goes according to plan, the assumption is there would never be another collapse like Lehman that we saw.
Absolutely. I mean, there was another line in the statement this morning where they made it clear that they do not intend to permit the disorderly failure of any more big financial institutions. The cost of the Lehman failure was simply too great.
Is it possible to go so far out on this limb toward government investment in banks in order to save them from themselves that it's impossible ever to go back again to where we were before, where private companies entirely control private interests?
Well, I think we need to think about two separate things here. One is ownership. Now, no one is suggesting that the government should long-term be in the business of running banks. All the people, even those who favor nationalization, suggest that the idea would be to get them back into private hands as quickly as possible by selling down the government's stake. So the ownership can be returned to the private sector in fairly short order, but some things can never be undone. The relationship between the banking system and government and the taxpayer has changed now, I think, forever. And we'll see that, for instance, in greater regulation of the banks. After all, once they've managed to put the economy and taxpayers at such great risk, the government is not going to allow that to happen again.
It's easy to look at what happened on Wall Street today and say, well, the markets kind of like the idea of what Citi was asking for, but didn't very much like the overall direction of the economy. Is that overreading?
You know, I think that there's some reassurance in the market that the government looks to be trying to support Citi as a private company, although it hasn't categorically ruled out nationalization. And there's some interest in the framework the government has set out, but people still aren't quite sure where this goes. And they're troubled by other news that AIG, for instance, the insurance giant, might soon announce giant losses and need more money from the government. And people worry that the trajectory of the whole economy remains very dark at the moment.
Yeah, they're talking $60 billion of projected losses from AIG.
That's
Krishna
right.
Guha from the Financial Times, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
President Obama once again spent the bulk of the day focusing on economic issues, speaking to the nation's governors about spending, and then presiding over an unusual bipartisan White House summit on fiscal responsibility. NewsHour correspondent Kwame Holman has more.
Today's Fiscal Responsibility Summit was the first step in a week-long effort by the president to put the focus on the nation's budget deficit.
We cannot and will not sustain deficits like these without end. Contrary to the prevailing wisdom in Washington these past few years, we cannot simply spend as we please and defer the consequences to the next budget, the next administration, or the next generation.
Mr. Obama told participants, which included lawmakers from both parties, as well as leaders of community organizations, he will cut the $1.3 trillion deficit in half by 2013. Savings were expected to come in part from a winding down of the war in Iraq and allowing the Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans to expire in 2011. The president said his budget will account for costs associated with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, natural disasters, and the yearly fix of the alternative minimum tax, items routinely left out of past budgets by the Bush administration.
For too long, our budget process in Washington has been an exercise in deception, a series of accounting tricks to hide the extent of our spending and the shortfalls in our revenue, and hope that the American people won't notice. Budgeting certain expenditures for just 1 year when we know we'll incur them every year for 5 or 10. Budgeting $0 for the Iraq War. Zero for future years, even when we knew the war would continue. Budgeting no money for natural disasters, as if we would ever go 12 months without a single flood, fire, hurricane, or earthquake. we do ourselves no favors by hiding the truth about what we spend. In order to address our fiscal crisis, we're going to have to be candid about its scope. And that's why the budget I will introduce later this week will look ahead 10 years and will include a full and honest accounting of the money we plan to spend and the deficits we will likely incur.
Take some nice deep breaths for me.
Mr. Obama added getting the country's economic house in order also would mean addressing health care costs, a task he called the single most pressing challenge. While his afternoon was spent figuring out ways to save money, Mr. Obama's morning dealt with how to spend money wisely. The president announced in a meeting with the nation's governors that Vice President Joe Biden would oversee the administration's implementation of the $787 billion stimulus plan. He also tapped Interior Department Inspector General Earl Devaney to lead the board charged with watching over how the funds are spent. President Obama informed the governors that the first installment of $15 billion from the stimulus would be made available Wednesday to help states cover the cost of Medicaid programs.
That means that by the time most of you get home, money will be waiting to help 20 million vulnerable Americans in your states keep their health care coverage. Children with asthma will be able to breathe easier. Seniors won't need to fear losing their doctors, and pregnant women with limited means won't have to worry about the health of their babies.
A handful of Republican governors have said they will turn down some of the funds, such as money to expand unemployment benefits, because it would require raising taxes on employers once the stimulus money runs out. Mr. Obama acknowledged such concerns were legitimate, but warned against fixating on one provision that accounts for less than 1% of the plan's overall cost.
So if we agree on 90% of the stuff, and we're spending all our time on television arguing about 1, 2, 3% of the spending in this thing, and somehow it's being characterized in broad brush as wasteful spending, that starts sounding more like politics. And that's what, right now, we don't have time to do.
Louisiana Republican Governor Bobby Jindal said last week he intended to pass on some of the unemployment funds. After today's meeting at the White House, he was asked if the president's comments were fair.
No. One, let me say this. I do appreciate the president acknowledging that there were legitimate concerns, legitimate issues when it comes to taking temporary federal dollars that could create permanent state spending obligations. For example, the money that we identified in Louisiana on Friday that we will not be accepting. However, I continue to say, as I've said before, that certainly I think there could have been a very different stimulus bill written. There could have been a stimulus bill that was truly targeted and temporary, focused on infrastructure, focused on the kinds of tax credits that would have gotten investment moving in the private sector.
At the conclusion of his fiscal responsibility summit late this afternoon, the president asked for reactions from participants. He first called on his former rival for the presidency, John McCain.
I know that you've already made plans to try to curb some of the excesses in procurement. We really have to do that. We're going to have to pay for Afghanistan, as you well know, and we're not done in Iraq, but most importantly, we have to make some tough decisions, or you, Mr. President, have to make some tough decisions about not only what we procure, but how we procure it. And I thank you for the opportunity of sharing thoughts with a lot of very smart people.
Well, John, this is going to be one of our highest priorities.
I think it's very symbolic and very interesting that the first person you called upon was John McCain. And that's the approach I think we need to take here generally, and specifically with health care reform.
Participants warned tough fiscal choices will test the philosophies of both political parties. Democrat Charles Rangel, chairman of the tax-writing House Ways and Means Committee, said some Republicans are likely to take issue with closing tax loopholes.
If you're looking for a fight in a partisan fight, every loophole you close is a tax increase. We have to get over that to make certain that the vast majority of businesses recognize it's in their best interest to do the right thing as relates to those who's taken unfair advantage of it.
Well, you were here in '86. It's been done before. We might be able to get it done this time.
For his part, Texas Republican Joe Barton reminded the president of the need to take seriously the concerns of the GOP.
I think the House Republicans have shown that when we're not included in the decision-making, we're disinclined to sign off on the solution. And it's very easy in the House, since it's set up to get things done quickly if the majority is united. to forget about the minority. But if you really want consensus, I would encourage you to encourage the Speaker to have a true open process.
On the one hand, the majority has to be inclusive. On the other hand, the minority has to be constructive. And so to the extent that on many of these issues, we are able to break out of sort of the rigid day-to-day politics and think long-term, then what you should see, I think, is the majority saying, what are your ideas? The minority's got to then come up with those ideas and not just want to blow the thing up.
President Obama will continue making his case to lawmakers tomorrow night when he addresses a joint session of Congress.
In other news today, a prisoner held for 4 years at Guantanamo Bay was released back to Britain. Binyam Mohammed claimed he endured medieval torture while in U.S. custody. He's the first detainee to be released under the Obama administration. We have a report from Simon Israel of Independent Television News.
A Gulfstream jet delivered the released detainee to RAF Northolt at lunchtime to mark the end of nearly 4.5 years incarceration in Guantanamo. On board, not just a doctor, but several police officers and Foreign Office officials too. The tall, lanky and stooped figure of Binyam Mohammed disembarked under escort of counter-terrorism officers. One had a camera in his hand, presumably to record the physical condition of someone who was not so long ago on hunger strike and said to be at death's door. Binyam Mohammed was arrested in Pakistan in 2002 as he tried to leave the country on suspicion of planning to detonate a dirty bomb in the US. He alleges he was detained for 4 months and interrogated by a British intelligence officer, then flown to Morocco on a CIA flight, a victim, his lawyers say, of extraordinary rendition. In Morocco, he claims he was tortured and abused while under interrogation by the Moroccans, who were armed with questions from MI5. Binyam was transferred to Afghanistan in 2004 and again allegedly tortured, and then on to Guantanamo, where he's remained for the last 4 years until charges were finally dropped and he was released today. Morocco, the United States and MI5 deny all these allegations.
There's been no suggestion of British direct help. Britain never condones or cooperates in torture, and any allegations of torture are immediately followed up.
Tonight, his lawyers simply wanted to focus on the return home.
Binyam just met his sister for the first time in 7 years. It was a very tearful reunion. It's wonderful to see it. It's a fantastic day.
The former detainee may well be in demand, but tonight he's been released from detention and off to, in his words, begin his road to recovery.
Today, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder began a visit to the military prison at Guantanamo Bay. The Obama administration is currently weighing its options in closing the facility. 3 U.S. soldiers and their interpreter were killed in Iraq. The U.S. military reported they died in combat in Diyala province, northeast of Baghdad. For the month of February, 13 Americans have died in Iraq. There are new reports that North Korea is continuing to enhance its ballistic missile capability. The South Korean Defense Ministry reported the North has deployed mid-range missiles that can travel more than 1,800 miles within striking distance of Australia, the U.S. territory of Guam, and Russia. The new missile is believed to be the same type displayed at a military parade in North Korea in 2007. And still to come on the NewsHour tonight, balancing new spending against old deficits, an Arab arts festival, and Secretary Clinton in Asia. Ray Suarez has our budget discussion.
How realistic is the president's pledge to halve the deficit by 2012? We asked that of 3 experts who attended today's summit. Douglas Holtz-Aiken is former director of the Congressional Budget Office. He also served as an economic advisor for John McCain's presidential campaign. Maya McGinnis is president of the Committee for a Responsible Budget at the New America Foundation. And Robert Greenstein heads the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And since all 3 of you were involved in the breakout groups after the president gave both his fairly grim diagnosis and his fearsome set of assignments, let me get a quick impression from all of you whether your groups in this afternoon's meeting thought what you were asked to do was doable. Bob Greenstein?
Well, today's session wasn't designed itself to produce some set of agreements in 3 hours. It was just the beginning of a process. There was a very good bipartisan feel in the room at the end. It was a very good first step, and as your clip showed, the president was completely in command of the room at the end of the day and expressing a real determination to make progress on these problems.
Maya McGinnis?
Well, I was in the tax session, and it was really an opportunity not to come forward and figure out a tax plan, but for Secretary Geithner and Christine Romer, who runs the CEA, to sort of hear from the participants, politicians and outsiders, what they think can be done on tax reform. There was a lot of talk about the importance of permanency, or sort of understanding where the tax code goes from here. We have a lot of things that change year to year. The alternative minimum tax, for instance, gets patched each year, or we have these tax cuts that are set to expire at the end of the decade. People said that needs to be made permanent. Whatever the policy is, we need to know what it will be. The tax code needs to be simplified, and there was also focus on other things like broadening the tax base, looking at corporate income tax reform. A lot of ideas were laid out there.
Douglas Holtz-Eakin?
Well, I was in the healthcare reform session, and I think it revealed all the tensions that are present in this entire process. People spoke optimistically about the chances to do major healthcare reform and the idea that we could get higher quality care in the United States at a lower cost. And I think there's a great opportunity there. There's a lot of agreement between Republicans and Democrats on needed changes in the practice of medicine in America that would deliver higher quality care and would actually get us a price tag we could afford in this nation. But there's also some pitfalls. Those changes will take a long time, and the cost savings will probably evolve very, very slowly. And if we rush into healthcare reform and cover a lot of people with big government programs, I think there are going to be political tensions, and there's going to be a big impact on a budget situation that's already very bad.
Maya McGinnis, the president stated the intention of cutting the deficit in half by the end of this presidential term. Are details starting to emerge on how you can do it?
Well, we're just starting to get a sense. We don't have the specifics yet. Let me just say that cutting the deficit in half over the presidential term will still leave us with very large deficits, about $500 billion. So what I would say about that fiscal goal is, one, it's very important to have a fiscal goal, to say what you're going to try to do and put that out there. Two, if we get to a $500 billion deficit at the end of the 4 years, we're not going to be saying, great, our work here is done. Instead, we're going to be saying we still have a lot of work to do. It's not close to sort of the whole thing being accomplished, but it is realistic, and I think that's a good thing, that I think we can do this depending on where the economy goes. It will take some tough policy choices, but frankly not enough, and the president was upfront about that today. He said there will be more to do, and I expect that over the next years the budget deficit, the budgets the administration puts forward will have to deal with this on an ongoing basis.
Douglas Holtz-Eakin, you heard Maya McGinnis call it realistic. Is it realistic when at the same time you're propping up major financial institutions, loaning automobile companies money, and trying to push money out the door to get the economy going again?
It's not only realistic, I don't think it's nearly aggressive enough. I would expect that when this budget comes out on Thursday, what the administration will show is that in 2013 the economy will have recovered, that tax revenues will have returned to historic norms, that they will show on the books hundreds of billions of dollars of additional revenues that come from higher tax rates on individuals and cap-and-trade proceeds from auctioning the permits. And despite that, we'll have a budget deficit of over $500 billion. And that suggests they're planning to spend an awful lot of money, and those are steps in the wrong direction, given our budget picture.
Robert Greenstein, what are the assumptions, or some of the assumptions, that the president is using in making these calculations? Just over $1 trillion in deficit now. If there's a target of $500 billion when it's all over, where's the money coming from?
Well, we need to be very clear that by 4 years from now, we're going to have an economy that is approaching a $20 trillion economy. We have to keep this in perspective. The deficit that he's talking about, President Obama, in 2013 equals only 3% of the size of the economy. Most budget experts think that if you're over 3%, you're on a path towards exploding debt, that we have to get back down on a permanent basis to the 2 to 3% range. And what's particularly important is his budget, A, uses realistic numbers for the first time since I can remember. For years, presidents have proposed budgets that leave out of them costs for doctors in Medicare, for patching, for giving people relief, middle-income people relief from the alternative minimum tax, for natural disasters that occur every year. Presidents have left those out, and their numbers down the road haven't meant anything. He's putting every one of those numbers in. He has a series of tough, I would say even courageous proposals that take on special interests in areas ranging from tax loopholes used by Wall Street traders to excess payments to private insurance companies and Medicare who were overpaid. His job is going to be to try to get Congress, members of both parties, to go along with or come up with their own courageous choices as he has done. And the second big question is the international economy. If we're still in a global recession 4 years from now, we won't be near a $500 billion deficit. It'll be much bigger. But if the economy recovers, he's using honest numbers. If he can get his proposals enacted, then I think we're going to see a deficit that's in the $1 to $2 trillion range now come well down, and we will be starting to get to that safer area of having deficits that do not exceed 3% of the size of the U.S. economy.
But along with building in, as Bob Greenstein mentioned, the amount for the war and things like that, are there also assumptions that the president is using that perhaps make the assignment less difficult?
Well, in fact, what they're doing is they get credit for being very honest about the policies that they're going to put in the baseline. They're going to talk about assuming the AMT is fixed every year. They're going to make the tax cuts that are expiring permanent. They're going to budget for the full cost of the war and even for emergencies that are likely to happen. This is all great on the point of transparency. However, what I don't think they're going to do, and we don't have all the details yet, is actually say how they're going to pay for these things. So if the favored policy is to make these tax cuts permanent, that's great. We do want to put that in the budget, but you also have some kind of an obligation to say, how are you going to offset the costs of those things? And that would be a bigger lift, and that would be something I'm not anticipating that they'll put in the budget, which means the deficits will be that much larger. I think a $500 billion deficit is troublesome. I do think we want to remain flexible, and so if the economy is doing well, we should shoot for higher. If it's not doing well, we want to focus on fixing the economy first. But sooner or later, we're going to have to get to the bottom line of how do you pay for these things? If you want to make the tax cuts permanent, how do you pay for it? If you want to expand health care, we need to offset all those costs. And it's not clear this budget is really going to deal with all those tough choices yet.
Douglas Holtz-Eakin, you just heard two perspectives on the numbers as they're understood by your colleagues. You're a former CBO head. Do they add up?
Well, I think there are two real important points here. Number one, I think the Bush administration's legacy of budgeting in ways that weren't exactly what we've seen in terms of what they actually wanted to do didn't fool anybody. So the notion that the transparency itself will solve all the problems, I think, is misplaced. What really matters is the policies. And I think Maya is right in that we won't know the full list of policies that will actually make this budget add up when it comes out on Thursday. And to Bob Greenstein's point, if we get to 3% of GDP in 2013, we will still be increasing the national debt relative to the size of the economy when it has skyrocketed in recent years. And we're entering into the period when the baby boom is going to retire. We're entering a period when there's tremendous pressures on the national debt anyway. It should be an aggressive budget that actually brings that down and doesn't accept an ever-rising national debt.
Why is it important to bring the budget deficit down by the end of this presidential term, Maya McGinnis?
Well, it's important that you have a plan to bring it down because you cannot borrow indefinitely. When you do, it places major macroeconomic pressures in your whole economy. So if you're borrowing, that means someone has to lend you the money. Right now we borrow a lot from overseas. If we borrow too much with no plan for how to bring the debt down, people are going to charge us more for that lending, and our interest rates are going to go up. What does that do? That could destabilize the economic recovery just when we're starting to get strong again. So you want to have a plan where you run deficits and you build up your debt when the economy is weak and you need that borrowing. But equally as important, or more important, is having a legitimate plan to pay back that once the economy has strengthened again. That's why you basically want to balance your budget over a business cycle. So when the economy is strong again, we actually should be shooting for budget surpluses. That's going to be a big challenge with the aging and healthcare challenges we have. We're going to have to deal with those.
And very briefly, Bob Greenstein, is it important symbolically, important as a message to markets, to regular American taxpayers?
It's important. It's not, I don't think it's critical to balance the budget. I disagree with Maya here. As Doug indicated, the key is that we can't have a debt explosion. It's like somebody whose credit card gets bigger and bigger and the interest payments they pay eat up more and more of their income. We can't let the debt grow faster than the economy. Now, what Obama is proposing is to get us by 2013 to the point where the debt isn't growing faster than the economy at that time. Doug is right that we'll then need to do a lot more. And Obama said today, this budget's only the first step. He then in coming years wants to go a lot farther so we avoid a debt explosion and we protect long-term economic growth.
And Doug Holtz-Eakin, important to be done quickly, very quickly.
It's important to do everything you can in the near term to put us in a position to deal with our long-term problems, as Bob said. Most importantly today, there was an agreement that the fundamental part of the long-term outlook is rising health care costs. We need to take that on because it will take a long time to get that right. And we can't keep our eye on just health care. We have to take care of everything else in between while we fix the health care system.
Guests, thanks a lot. To be continued.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, an unusual window on life and culture in the Arab world as we begin a series of reports tied to a festival of Arab arts at Washington's Kennedy Center. Jeffrey Brown reports.
Most often, the Middle East conjures up images and sounds of war and terrorism, religious fundamentalism, and constant struggle. But here is another sight, another sound. These are the children of the Al-Farah Choir, or the Choir of Joy. More than 100 Muslim and Christian young people who sing in a 30-year-old group founded by a Catholic priest in Damascus, Syria. Yesterday, some of the children sang at Mass at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. A tune-up of sorts for their performance tomorrow as part of an ambitious 3-week festival called Arabesque, Arts of the Arab World. It opens tonight at Washington's John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. For Kennedy Center President Michael Kaiser, the festival is about art, certainly, but about something more as well.
Well, I believe that peace comes from understanding, and so if we know more about other people and have a rounder view of them and a more educated view of other people, then we can start to make peace. I believe that this festival is going to help people to understand Arab people, to understand their aesthetic tastes, to understand their hospitality and their generosity and their passion, and we'll start to understand them not just as political beings, but as human beings.
How, though? I mean, how does watching a dance or a theater or a musician, how does it do all that?
Well, to start with, it comes from just showing another view of Arab people. All we see on television are people running around escaping bombs or thrusting bombs, and we don't see on television very much that has to do with the other side of the culture of the Arab people. So just having a dance company here starts to make people question, I didn't know they had a dance company. I didn't know they cared about dance. That's how it starts.
Indeed, they do dance. The Caracalla Dance Theater from Lebanon is part of this immense undertaking, which involves some 800 performers from 22 countries of the Arab world, stretching from North Africa to the Levant to the Persian Gulf, a region the organizers want to make clear of great diversity.
We have to understand there isn't one monolithic Arab person. There are many different kinds of Arab people within those 22 countries, and I think that's part of what we're trying to teach. The culture of Morocco is very, very different from the culture of Syria, which is very, very different from the culture of Oman.
In recent days, the Kennedy Center has been transforming itself for this $10 million festival, the most complex the center has ever presented. 2 tons of cargo have arrived from Arab countries. Massive arches and a masharabiyah, or window of carved wood latticework, constructed in Egypt, are part of an exhibition called Breaking the Veils, featuring works by Arab women artists. And a gift shop has been made over into a souk, or marketplace. There will be exhibitions of fashion, including wedding dresses from around the region, of art and photography, and an exploratorium including a film projecting ancient texts that will highlight Arab contributions to society between the 8th and 15th centuries, advances in math, medicine, astronomy, and chemistry. At the heart of the festival, 5 theaters will feature performances in music, dance, and theater, from the traditional to a rapper from Somalia named Kenan. The Kennedy Center is known for its festivals of international arts. But the politically charged Mideast, from the post-9/11 talk of a clash of civilizations to the fallout from the Iraq War and the continuing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, combined to make this a special challenge. Alicia Adams, the Kennedy Center's head of international programming, was in charge of finding performers throughout the Arab world.
When I started going to the region, it was at a time when certainly the popularity of this country was very, very low. And I wasn't sure whether the artists were going to say they were not interested because it was America. It was the Kennedy Center, which is a quasi-federal institution, that somehow this was a tool of the administration. And that was a worry. Would they come? And I was just so pleased to learn on these trips, as I met artist after artist after artist, that they were very interested in coming here. They very much wanted to tell their stories, to be able to be seen in a different light, to be able to show the beauty and humanity that exists with them as a people and as a culture. I think they want people to know that they're not terrorists.
Among those coming to the festival is Aza Fahmy, an Egyptian jewelry maker who documents the history of her craft and adorns her pieces with Arabic calligraphy and poetry.
I love my culture, and I love jewelry, and I put everything together. So when I read a book about Khalil Gibran, I like to see it on a ring, or I like to see it on a bracelet, or I like to see it on a pendant.
In Kuwait, writer and theater director Sulaiman Al-Bassam explores issues of contemporary Gulf and Arab society with a twist by adapting the works of William Shakespeare.
The society that he's describing is a society of power struggles, of individuals looking for and seeking new ways to be and to express themselves. So the work he makes kind of translates across different ages, different societies, different places.
Lebanese musician Marcel Khalife is a singer, master of the oud or lute, and composer for small and large ensembles, who speaks of love in a part of the world that has been torn apart by strife.
As human beings, every day we need to learn how to love. We need to learn and to read poetry and listen to music every day. Perhaps if we do these things, people will discover beauty and happiness.
In Washington yesterday, Al-Farah choir members from Damascus said the festival creates a real opportunity to reach across barriers.
We should touch the other hearts, and we should communicate people to people, and this is the main idea.
I always dreamed of coming to America, and now I didn't just come to America. I came to sing and spread peace, and music really does something, changes something in your mind.
Creating the space for that kind of change is a hope of Kennedy Center organizers, who've brought together young people from both Oman and the U.S. in a specially commissioned piece by choreographer Debbie Allen.
It's probably the best thing that we will do in this festival in terms of creating a dialogue, creating cultural exchange between the young people. And for me, more than the end product, it's the process.
3, 4 foot back, 6.
The Kennedy Center's festival, Arabesque Arts of the Arab World, runs through March 15th.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2.
Tomorrow night, Shakespeare in the Persian Gulf, as Jeff continues his series of reports. Much more on the series and the Kennedy Center's Arabesque Festival is available online. Look for the Art Beat page on our website. Finally, tonight, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has just returned from her first trip abroad to Asia and is already planning her second trip. Margaret Warner is here with a look at the Secretary's focus so far.
In a break with tradition, Secretary of State Clinton made her maiden trip in her new role, not to Europe or the Middle East, but to the world's most populous region, Asia.
I have come to Asia as my first trip as Secretary of State to convey that America's relationships across the Pacific are indispensable. How are you?
Secretary Clinton's trip began with a visit to longtime ally and economic partner Japan. From there, she went to Indonesia, South Korea, and China. The economy and strategic issues dominated her agenda on every stop. She made that intention clear to reporters before leaving Seoul for China. While we have to continue to press the Chinese on human rights, she said, pressing on those issues can't interfere with the global economic crisis, the global climate change crisis, and the security crisis.
How are you? Madam Secretary.
In Beijing Saturday, after meeting with China's president, foreign minister, and premier, she spoke of the Obama administration's desire to work with China on the biggest global issues of the day.
There are a number of areas we can work on together. We're constructing and have agreed in principle to a strategic and economic dialogue.
She tried to reassure her host that China's investment in U.S. government debt remains sound.
I appreciate greatly the Chinese government's continuing confidence in United States treasuries. I think that's a well-grounded confidence.
She also highlighted climate change, touring a thermal power plant that produces about half the emissions of a typical coal plant. China recently surpassed the United States as the world's biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. Clinton's candid, straight-talking style was also in evidence in South Korea, where she had some strong words for North Korea.
North Korea is not going to get a different relationship with the United States while insulting and refusing dialogue with the Republic of Korea.
And she raised some diplomatic eyebrows by talking to reporters about the deteriorating health of North Korea's leader and her concerns that a succession struggle there could hamper efforts to deal with the North's nuclear program. In Jakarta, capital of the world's largest Muslim nation, Indonesia, she was greeted at the airport by students from the elementary school President Obama once attended. Everywhere, she reached out beyond government officials to the public. She was interviewed by a blogger in China and on this TV show in Jakarta.
What is your favorite music and artist?
Oh, you know, I am older than you are, so
Okay.
you know, for me, it's really the old standbys, like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones,
Okay.
and I am really, you know, very,
Secretary Clinton returned to Washington last night. Today, the State Department announced she will leave next week for the Middle East. And now for an assessment of Secretary Clinton's first official trip. Wendy Sherman was State Department counselor to Secretary Madeleine Albright and special advisor on North Korea. She's now a principal with the Albright Group. And Christian Brose was chief speechwriter and a policy advisor to Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. He is now a senior editor at Foreign Policy magazine. Welcome, both of you. Wendy Sherman, beginning with you. What did Secretary Clinton achieve on this trip, do you think?
I think Secretary Clinton began to reset the table for national security and foreign policy of the United States of America. She went out to Asia to say that we really are in a global century where we have to focus on the whole world. And as we've seen with the global economic crisis, it does engage the entire world. And so I think she went to listen, to present the face of President Obama and the Obama administration, and to begin to build the long-term relationships we need to deal with economics, deal with transnational issues like proliferation and climate, and to deal with the values that we hold dear, human rights, democracy, and all the issues that give people prosperity and hope in the world.
I want to come back to the human rights question, but first of all, Chris Bose, resetting the table, is that what it looked like to you?
No, that was my sense. You know, I think this was a rebranding tour. This was an opportunity for Secretary Clinton to make her maiden voyage and say that things are now entirely different. I think that it was a smart move to go to Asia first. But I do think that, there's a lot more continuity here than we realize. I think the decision to go to Asia was one that Secretary Rice's policy planning staff recommended. And I think that largely what you see on this stop are, an attempt to sort of reach out to these rising powers in Asia to say that we want to work together to solve global problems, and that's broadly consistent with the approach the Bush administration passed off through the work that they did in their second term.
Is there anything really different that she signaled, Wendy Sherman, policy-wise?
Well, I think she signaled...
Or is it sort of a continuation policy-wise?
I think there is some continuity, but I think what she said is we are here to listen, not to lecture. We are here to work with you, but on issues of concern to us and our national interest. We are here to highlight Indonesia's enormous efforts towards democracy, which they did from the inside out as opposed to from the outside in. And we're here to look at those issues that are really going to take all of us in this boat together to solve.
But are you saying there was a focus that was missing from the previous administration?
I think the previous administration led us into a war in Iraq. That said to the rest of the world that we had a focus, we weren't interested in other people's interests, we weren't interested in listening to them and working together and solving big problems that cut across sovereignty and cut across boundaries. And I think what Secretary Clinton, what President Obama has been saying repeatedly throughout the campaign, and more importantly, now that President Obama is President of the United States, is we are here to work together to solve these global issues.
Did you see any new policy direction, Chris Brose, other than being in more of a listening mode?
I think the focus on climate change was a departure. I think that the attempt to put that front and center with our relationship with China was not something that you would have seen the Bush administration do. That being said, I do think that the attempt, or the contours of that relationship are broadly the same. I think that the getting past looking at China as either a strategic partner to engage or a strategic threat to contain, and looking at its rise as a geopolitical fact, and putting the question of how is China going to use its rising power in the new century? What global problems is it going to work with us to solve? I think this is the responsible stakeholder policy that the Bush administration passed to the Obama administration, and I think the focus on climate change, though a departure to some degree, is broadly consistent with the strategy that the Bush administration was pursuing.
And by responsible stakeholder, you mean trying to make China be a more quote-unquote responsible stakeholder in the global
Correct.
order?
To shoulder the burdens as well as the benefits of globalization.
What explains, Wendy Sherman, what she said about human rights? Now, this is a woman who 14 years ago as First Lady went to Beijing, gave a very high-profile speech, a very vehement speech, passionate defense of human rights and women's rights, so much so that I'm told the Chinese had pulled the plug on her address on Chinese television. Why this new tone?
I think that everyone knew she had given that speech. When she gave the Asia Society speech before she left for the trip, she laid out the importance of human rights, democracy, civil society. So she was very clear that this is part of an American framework. These are our values. But she also understood that we're trying to build relationships, that the greatest human rights right that a person has is the right to a livelihood, and that first and foremost we had to focus on the global economic crisis to make sure that people can raise their families and look forward to educating their children and having health care. That's true here, that's true in China, in South Korea, in Japan, and in Indonesia.
But was she signaling, do you think, that the concern about human rights, what's happening with dissidents in China, what's happening in Tibet, in the U.S. view is going to take a back seat to these other issues?
I think it might take a more private seat, in the sense that it isn't about whether you're going to be candid about these issues. I'm sure in her meeting with the foreign minister she discussed these issues. She said as much. But is she going to do it in front of the curtain? Is she going to do it quietly? Face in Asia is a very important thing. People want to make sure that their pride and dignity are maintained, and I think she's respectful of other people's societies, but very clear about the value of human rights and democracy.
Human rights groups were very critical of this, Chris
Right.
Brose. Do you think it was the right tack to take?
No, I think it was a mistake. I think it was a gaffe. I think that it's one thing to not say anything and to go and have those meetings and raise those issues in private, but to essentially cut the legs out from your policy by saying that it's not going to be working, I think is a mistake.
That's what she said. She said, they know what we're going to say, we know what they're going to say, and so it's not.
So, and to her
something we want
defense,
to
she
emphasize.
met with religious groups, labor groups, women's groups. So deeds matter, but words matter too. And
no, I'm just going to follow up with that. Would you say, though, that that was also kind of the Bush administration policy, that they did not let human rights concerns get in the way of certainly the economic agenda they were pursuing?
absolutely. I think that
with China.
There was the recognition in the Bush administration that this didn't need to be a false choice. You know, that you could both hold China to the high standards that we all try to hold ourselves to in regard to human rights, but at the same time work on issues of common interests and common concern. And I think that the shift of emphasis is something that didn't need to happen publicly. It's something that you can engage that conversation privately, but you're just creating problems for yourself, because the next time you come out, everyone will ask you, so what are you going to do about human rights this time? And it's just a needless distraction.
I think, however, though, that actions do matter here. During the last 8 years before the Obama administration, we had a lot of secrecy. We had some human rights problems of our own with Abu Ghraib, with Guantanamo, with the policy on torture. And so the Obama administration has to signal that this is a new day, that these are important issues, but our deeds matter. So the meeting with 23 advocates, the going to Indonesia, which is a really burgeoning democracy, all of these matter a great deal.
Let me ask you both how you think this candor about what she was going to do about human rights, candor about the North Korean leader Kim Jong-il's failing health. We Americans love that kind of straight talk, but is there a risk for a chief diplomat in this?
I think there can be a risk at times. I think the Bush administration got itself into a lot of problems with its candor at times. But I think with regard to some of her more candid moments on the trips, I think, you have to separate them out. I think what she said about North Korea, what she said about Burma, I think that was candor. It was stating the obvious, and it wasn't very problematic. With regard to Burma, it was also the recognition that they were reviewing a policy, so admitting that it was failing was okay. But when you say that, your human rights dialogue, your efforts to discuss human rights with China aren't going to get anywhere, I think that's a different situation, and it's more problematic.
Finally, let me ask you both about, there's been a lot of commentary that she's subcontracted a couple of the toughest issues or toughest areas of the world, the Middle East and Afghanistan, Pakistan, to these special envoys. How active should we expect her to be on those fronts?
I think you've seen the answer right away. She's traveling in a week to Egypt for a Gaza donor conference. She's going to the West Bank and to Israel. So I think you'll see her very active on those issues. There is a lot going on in the world. And I think it is a great tribute to the President and to the Secretary that they have brought on board very senior, very serious diplomats to help solve these problems. This is not a new phenomenon. Every president has used this device, and I think it's very wise to do so in this very difficult time.
How do you see that playing out in terms of her involvement in those areas?
I think that's largely true. I think she'll continue to be engaged in these issues, but I also think that you could read it as a very smart and savvy move on her part, which is she'll allow some of these envoys, some of these other members of the administration to bang their heads on some of these intractable problems, and she'll focus on a sort of low-risk, high-reward place like Asia, where she can really make her mark and make a legacy for herself, in addition to the work she'll be doing inside the State Department on reform issues. So she'll be engaged in all these issues for sure, but I think where she really sees making her mark, at least from this first trip and what we've been hearing in reports, is a real focus for her on Asia.
All right, Christopher Brose and Wendy Sherman, thank you both.
Thanks.
Again, the major developments of the day. Stocks on Wall Street tumbled to their lowest levels in 11 years. The Dow fell 250 points and the NASDAQ was down more than 50. The drop came after reports Citigroup was asking the government to raise its equity stake in the company. And President Obama met with congressional leaders and the nation's governors to discuss economic issues and spending priorities. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening with special coverage of President Obama's primetime address to a joint session of Congress. I'm Gwen Eiffel. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by
oil, energy, the environment. Where are the answers? Graduation in New Jersey from 1987. Wow. She just got it last week. Her brother wondered why she didn't respond to the notice back then, but figured it was because she lived so far away, couldn't go anyway. Postal Service says the mail probably got stuck in machinery. They say no matter the age of the mail, if it's postmarked, it's delivered.
I'm sure he probably still wants a gift, too.
The money, you bet. See you tomorrow.
Fisher Communications.
Good morning, I'm Steve Leader.
And I'm Rebecca Marshall. Good morning.
Tomorrow with up to 3 feet of standing water in their parking lot.
No cyclists were killed in Portland last year. None.
Just ahead in sports, we're previewing the Blazers. Your first choice for live local news is News Radio 750 KXL.
Bigger, yet faster. More powerful, yet more fuel efficient. The laws of physics, merely loose suggestions. The Audi A4, truth in engineering. Experience the category-changing A4 at your Audi dealer today.
Wow.
What?
Nothing.
I can take this whenever you guys are ready.
Oh, thanks.
Because I paid for it last, so, you know.
That's it. Love this place. Free Wi-Fi.
Free paper.
Free refills.
If you like free, you'll love WAMU Free Checking. Get free online banking, a free debit card, free checks, and free ATM cash withdrawals.
Do you have a biscotti? Another one?
Biscotti's free.
Yeah, I knew that.
Free checking from WAMU. Now backed by the power of Chase.
If your energy bills are higher than ever, don't you wish you had Penguin Windows? Penguin guarantees at least 40% savings the very first year with our triple-pane Krypton gas-filled windows. And if you enter our $25,000 Silver Anniversary Sweepstakes, you could win one of over 25 great prizes, including $10,000 worth of triple-pane Penguin windows. Visit our website, find out about our amazing windows, and enter to win our $25,000 sweepstakes. Penguin Windows. There's nothing else like them.
Evergreen Public Schools, the third largest school district in the metro area, promoting excellence, nurturing personal growth, the leaders of tomorrow.
At ABM Janitorial Services, excellence begins with customer service.
We at ABM are honored to serve tomorrow's leaders throughout Evergreen Public Schools.
Evergreen Public Schools, where all students have the opportunity to attain the skills necessary to be world competitive.
You know what, Mike? I'm moving in.
What, with me?
What, are you crazy? I'm moving into La Quinta. These low rates are cheaper than my mortgage.
What about your family?
They're gonna love your house. Thanks, Chief.
Wake up on the bright side at La Quinta Inns and Suites with rates from $59.
La Quinta.
Make your commute easier with K2's Traffic Tracker. Weekday mornings from 5 to 7 on K2 News, plus updates during Good Morning America. K2's Traffic Tracker is brought to you by Town & Country Dealerships. Drive home happy.
It's 7:08 at KXL, and we bring you traffic and weather on the 8th.
On I-84, getting a bit of a break now.
Highs today up to 56 degrees.
Brings you traffic and weather every 10 minutes on the 8th. Your first choice for live local news is News Radio 750 KXL.
A detailed forecast to plan your day. K2 Storm Tracker weather.